Do you take growth hormone?
No, I don't.
Have you
I
ever?
have though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, we should have laid it. What I would describe the premise of your channel is a series of scientific experiments on gear and SARMs and that whole class of things on you. So you'll try it
Yeah.
for, I'm making up timelines, like a number of weeks or months, and say, this is what this SARM did to me. This is what I took. This is how long I took it, and this is how I felt about it.
Another little fact finding thing for people watching. Can you kind of go through the, I guess, vocabulary, like SARMs, the different kinds of steroids? Like, I don't know anything. I know, like, from watching your videos, like finasteride or something like that. Like, I'm sure there's a bunch of different kinds. just so people can kind of get it.
Okay, so like in general, the breakdown of different like classes of compounds is like anabolic steroids, which is like all the shit you've probably heard of, like D-bol, testosterone, DECA, that kind of stuff, trenbolone. That's all anabolic steroids, and that's largely what's going to dictate muscle growth. Like that's like the base of everything to do with muscle essentially in your body. Like 90% of it is driven by, and that's just a rough estimate. That's obviously not, the main thing is like your testosterone in your body is, it's technically in a dictionary, it's a androgen, but all the anabolic steroids that people use for muscle growth are derived from that testosterone molecule. So those things that you hear of, the trenbolone, the DECA, the whatever, those are all in the anabolic steroid class. As far as what SARMs are, typically I wouldn't even tell somebody it's worth exploring until they understand the first thing. I actually did a video recently called the anabolic steroid family tree, and for anyone who wants like a very newbie breakdown of each steroid, because even within that category there's like different types of categories, and it gets really complicated. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people when they watch my shit, they're like, what is this guy even fucking talking about? You know, like you don't know where to start. This thing provides a framework of like, okay, here's like the parent molecule, testosterone. Here's this class of compound, this class, and this class. They each have this type of impact on athletic performance. They might be leveraged in this sport versus this sport versus this sport. They might be used for this goal versus this goal. You know what I mean? And then, so those are like the steroids. SARMs is kind of like something that was supposed to replace steroids, because if a girl or a kid uses a steroid in like a medical setting, so let's say some kid or some woman has muscle wasting or something, instead of injecting them with a steroid, which in the past we've seen, makes them, get masculinizing side effects, which is obviously not a good outcome for some little fucking kid who hasn't even hit puberty yet to be jabbing him with testosterone or whatever, or some chick. So SARMs are meant to like replace the muscle building capacity of a steroid without making them like a man, pretty much.
Tell me how close I'm coming. I'm sorry, Kyle. I know you're biting at the bit too, and you're chomping at the bit.
Chomping at it.
Yeah. So they're androgen receptors, and those are all kinds of different things that react to testosterone, maybe growing a mustache, muscles, etc. And then SARMs are specific androgen receptors. That's the S. And ideally, if things work perfectly, SARMs are like steroids that only impact muscles. Am I close?
Yeah, like the chemical structure of them, you can't really define them as a steroid because they're not technically derived from that like testosterone molecule, but they're like a synthetic drug, whereas testosterone's actually like something you produce.
The S is specific, right? Specific androgen receptor molecule. Did I get it?
Yeah, so basically how you would build muscle, like at the most basic level, is you have androgen receptors in your muscles, everywhere in your body. And for the steroid to work, it needs to bind to the androgen receptor and transcribe its effects in the tissue. So that's why you would have a certain steroid, has a certain affinity to bind to muscle here, or affinity to bind to your prostate, or affinity to bind to somewhere. And how, the characterization of what it does depends on the chemical, the affinity to bind, its level of how much it's going to masculinize you. Like there's like a whole sub layer of shit underneath that. But basically the target of all of them is essentially the androgen receptor, whereby they build the muscle essentially and like, maintain bone and all this kind of stuff. But there's like off target activity, which is like next level shit not even worth elaborating on, where you have like stuff that prevents muscle wasting, like by hitting glucocorticoid receptors, which prevents cortisol from transcribing its effects, because cortisol is anti, catabolic and whatnot. Like there's a whole another section of that, but at a base level, yeah, like the androgen receptor is basically what essentially facilitates if a steroid is even, because you could have a steroid floating around that's not really doing shit if it's not binding to the receptor first and then doing its thing. So